Hello and welcome back to the absolutely only channel on YouTube.com making videos about Harry Potter. Have you ever thought, man, some of these spells don't make a whole lot of sense, or the Cloak of Invisibility doesn't seem to really do all that much at all? You're not alone. Whoa. There's some issues with the world building here, so today I'm going to be ranking magical items in Harry Potter. From 1, something that's mostly harmless, to 5, something that's apocalyptic, possibly? And everything in between. Standard disclaimer, before you comment, it's magic, it doesn't need to make sense. I know that. Restrain yourself. Let's dive back in. Magical portraits. The magical moving portraits are very much a hallmark of the Harry Potter wizarding universe. But have you ever stopped to really think about them and how they work? In particular, how alive are they? Let's look at a few examples. Yeah, he has, said Harry, excitement blazing in his chest at the prospect of telling Dumbledore that he had secured the memory. He wheeled about and sprinted off again, ignoring the fat lady who was calling after him. Come back. All right, I lied. I was annoyed you woke me up. The password's still tapeworm. I just want to call out that the fat lady has the ability to be annoyed in the first place, which you might just be saying that could be a pre-programmed sort of emotion that the fake life within the magical portraits is able to express. But we're gonna get there, just don't worry. Because I think J.K. Rowling also knows that there's a problem here. I created a lot of rules for this world and then later had to navigate my way around them. But this rule was always good. Portraits could only move between portraits in the same building. Otherwise, we can only move to other places where we have a portrait. You are limited by geography. So this is J.K. Rowling responding to like the limitations around the portraits, and I believe why Harry just didn't talk to Dumbledore at certain points throughout the story after he died in Half-Blood Prince. I would also say that they have fear, and they also seem to have the capability of being harmed. The fat lady had vanished from her portrait, which had been slashed so viciously that strips of canvas littered the floor. Great chunks of it had been torn away completely. Dumbledore took one quick look at the ruined painting and turned, his eyes somber, to see Professors McGonagall, Lupin, and Snape hurrying toward him. We need to find her, said Dumbledore. Professor McGonagall, please go to Mr. Filch at once and tell him to search every painting in the castle for the fat lady. So this is after Sirius Black comes in looking for information, doesn't get it from the fat lady, he destroys the portrait and she flees because presumably she's in danger, which is something you don't say about non-living things. Later in the story, when the painting is repaired and she returns, she also has like trolls standing guard over her portrait. So there's not only does she have fear, but she has enough fear that Dumbledore agrees to put trolls in there to guard it. If there was no basis for her fear, I don't think he would have done that in the first place. Honestly, this is slowly turning into basically an episode of Black Mirror. I think these painting people are explicitly distinct being, separate from the subject that they're painted after. Even if they have some loyalty that extends to their own person, I do still think they're separate entities. We also know that they have friends. The fat lady heard about Harry being a Triwizard champion from one of her portrait friends. Honestly, one thing that I thought about though was that I'm surprised there aren't any paintings of the founding members of Hogwarts, but maybe a conversation with Salazar Slytherin wouldn't have been all that insightful. They have basically all the makings to be very much sentient beings that are just trapped in paintings for eternity. When you combine all of these aspects of the portrait world, I think it kind of raises the specter of immortality once again in the story. Does your painting live forever? It's clear that other headmaster portraits have been around for a long, long time, and it seems like they will continue being around indefinitely. They are essentially trapped for eternity in their own painting, potentially in just one building forever. And if that's not bad enough, if you're a witch or wizard in this world that knows about this and you willingly create a sentient being of yourself and then trap them eternally in a portrait, that's like ethically abhorrent. So because of all of this, because this society is a walking, breathing Black Mirror episode, because of the inconsistencies of the theme of death within this series, because over time you would end up with so many portraits, there'd be so many of them sitting around. I mean, would you infinitely store them, or is it someone's job to like dispatch them? That's a pretty awful job to have. I mean, I don't know if storage space is a problem in the wizarding world. Maybe it's not, thankfully, but like if it is, and it's someone's job to get rid of paintings when they don't have space for them, that's an awful job. Because of all of that, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5. I think the magical portraits open up a whole host of questions that make this society one that I just really don't know if I would want to live in. Before we dive in, I want to quickly thank our sponsor, CyberGhost VPN. You know how the Marauders Map can track everyone at Hogwarts? What they're doing, where they're going, who they're talking to? Imagine that, but instead of Harry watching you, it's your internet service provider or your work's IT department tracking everything you do online. That's basically what the internet looks like without a VPN. And just like how the Cloak of Invisibility doesn't stop you from being seen on the Marauders Map, incognito mode doesn't stop anyone from tracking you online either. That's where today's sponsor, CyberGhost VPN, comes in. With over 38 million users worldwide and over 20,000 excellent Trustpilot reviews, it's one of the most trusted VPNs out there. CyberGhost encrypts and reroutes all of your traffic through one of their secure servers, so no one can see your digital footprints. Think of it like a Fidelius charm, but for your Wi-Fi. And the best part is you can pick from over 100 locations before you browse, which is great for accessing content that's blocked in your region. You can stream shows on Netflix, Disney Plus, or Amazon Prime that normally you wouldn't be able to access. You might even get better prices online just by changing your virtual location. Imagine you want to hear Harry talk about the Philosopher's Stone and not the Sorcerer's Stone. That version of the movie might be locked away across the pond, and the only way you can get it is by using CyberGhost VPN to digitally apparate over there. It works on all major devices and operating systems, Windows, Mac, Android, and iOS, and you can protect up to 7 devices at once, which is perfect for sharing with friends and family. With a link in the description, you can get their best deal ever. Just $2.03 a month, plus 4 additional months absolutely for free, which is 84% off the normal price. And if you're still skeptical, there's a 45-day money-back guarantee. You can support my channel by signing up for CyberGhost using the link in the description below. Signing up helps protect your online privacy and helps me make more content for you. All right, mischief managed. Let's dive back in. Portkeys. Why is it always spinning? Every method of transportation in Harry Potter, it's always spinning. Floo Network spinning, Portkeys spinning, apparition spinning, plus you lose your arms and legs if you do it wrong. If you don't know what a Portkey is, first of all, how did you find this video? Second of all, it's basically a method of teleportation that doesn't require the user to know any magic. Our first introduction to them happens in Goblet of Fire on the way to the Quidditch World Cup. For those who don't want to apparate or can't, we use Portkeys. They're objects that are used to transport wizards from one spot to another at a prearranged time. You can do large groups at a time if need to. There have been 200 Portkeys placed at strategic points around Britain, and the nearest one to us is up at the top of Stoat's Head Hill, so that's where we're headed. What sort of objects are Portkeys? Said Harry, curiously. Well, they can be anything, said Mr. Weasley. Unobtrusive things, obviously, so muggles don't go picking them up and playing with them. Stuff they'll just think is litter. Right off the bat, there's a couple things that are clear. First of all, it seems like anyone can use one. Even if a muggle touches a Portkey, it seems like it transports them. Second, it sets the stage for how dangerous I think apparition actually is. I think we watch the wizard cops most of the time, and they're pretty good at doing magic, but I think most people probably can't apparate very well. So they use things like the Floo and Portkeys. Based on the description of how Portkeys are used, it does make me wonder if it's the same type of magic as apparition, just channeled into an object that can do the magic for you. For instance, you can do Portkeys with multiple people at the same time, similar to how you can apparate with other people at the same time. Although, I don't know if that has a limit. Maybe you just need to be more and more powerful to apparate with more and more people. Who knows? Portkeys, everyone's gotta just grab the thing and then you go. But there are some distinctions with Portkeys that, I don't know, seems to make it different from apparition. For one, they seem to be capable of traveling much further distances than you can when you apparate. And I think the fact that they have different limitations makes me think that it's actually a different form of base magic making them work. We see Dumbledore create one pretty easily in Order of the Phoenix. He walked away from the pool to the place where the golden wizard's head lay on the floor. He pointed his wand at it and muttered, "Portus." The head glowed blue and trembled noisily against the wooden floor for a few seconds, then became still once more. "Now see here, Dumbledore," said Fudge as Dumbledore picked up the head and walked back to Harry carrying it. "You haven't gotten authorization for that Portkey. You can't do things like that right in front of the Minister of Magic. You... His voice faltered as Dumbledore surveyed him magisterially over his half-moon spectacles. There's a couple things about this passage to point out. First of all, the spell is Portus, which to me obviously seems like it's a word for door or portal. So it's more like going through a wormhole maybe than teleporting? I don't know if there's a distinction between that, but it seems separate from apparition. Second, not even Dumbledore is allowed to make Portkeys. Portkeys are heavily regulated by the Ministry of Magic, which begs the question, why? There's so much other magic that can cause way bigger problems than a teleportation spell.
Trificus totalis.
The whole world's allowed to teleport at will with apparition and the Floo Network. Why are Portkeys restricted? We know from Lupin that the fine for setting up an unauthorized Portkey is tremendous. How are we getting wherever we're going? Harry asked. Brooms, said Lupin. Only way. You're too young to apparate, they'll be watching the Floo Network, and it's more than our lives worth to set up an unauthorized Portkey. That said, does the Ministry actually know when one is created? I don't think they can actually trace an individual and their use of magic, so what's the risk here, especially if they're doing this in secret? The other question I have is, are they allowed to just make Portkeys go to Hogwarts? It seems like Dumbledore does it really easily. They seem to sort of get around the limitations that other things have going into Hogwarts. Plenty of times Portkeys would have been way more useful than whatever other version of travel they went with. Draco, for example, wouldn't have needed to spend his entire 6th year fixing up the vanishing cabinets. He could have just made a Portkey and teleported everyone in. It's not like anyone was going to actually find him for doing that, so why not? The other thing that's interesting about Portkeys is they don't seem to be consensual modes of travel. In Goblet of Fire, right when Harry and Cedric grab the trophy, they're transported. They don't willingly decide to go to the graveyard. I don't think they would have made that choice willingly, so clearly it just drags you along. But there's also an example from Quidditch Through the Ages where it's very clearly used as a weapon of sorts. While there have been no proven referee slayings since, there have been several incidences of broom tampering over the centuries, the most dangerous being the transformation of the referee's broom into a Portkey, so that he or she is whisked away from the match halfway through and turns up months later in the Sahara Desert. Okay, so there's a couple. This is like making the assumption that the referee gets stuck in the Sahara Desert. Like, I don't understand why they stayed there for months if they can also presumably teleport at will or fly the broom that got transported with them. But even still, the idea of forcefully transporting or teleporting someone somewhere seems like it could be pretty disastrous. Also because it doesn't seem like you need to have been to that place to set up the Portkey. I highly doubt that the individuals that enchanted the broom had been to the Sahara Desert and knew where they were sending him. I guess there's a chance, but that seems less likely than just whisking him away somewhere. I can't imagine the use case exactly, but picture this. You have a handful of rocks and you enchant each and every little pebble with a different location, and then you just scatter them like birdseed to pigeons, and you just send people across the whole planet. Suddenly, Portkeys seem like one of the most dangerous objects and spells you can cast in this world. There's seemingly no range limit. There's seemingly no need to know where you're sending someone. I mean, it seems like you could have just set up a Portkey going directly into someone's vault in Gringotts or something without having to mess with all the Polyjuice Potion disguises and whatnot. I mean, honestly, it seems like you could make a Portkey go to the moon. I don't really know what's stopping any of this. Somewhat unconnected, I kind of wish that instead of a Harry Potter TV show reboot, they would have taken a page out of Star Wars Andor and done something completely unconnected and like bank heist style. I feel like there could be way more interesting ways to explore the magic than just showing us the same thing again. What do I know? But when it comes to ranking this, there's a couple things I'm thinking about. First of all, fines don't stop people from doing bad things. So I don't think there's anything stopping people from using Portkeys in nefarious ways. Two, I don't know if there's that many skill limitations around what you can do with Portkeys. It seems like you can send anyone anywhere without them wanting to at any time. And presumably, if you put someone in the middle of the Sahara, I don't know if they could apparate back. You can't apparate that far. So you do just kind of strand them there. Again, he probably should have just ridden away with his broom. Anyway, I'm gonna start this off by giving Portkeys a 4 out of 5. I truly think these would be used in such destructive ways if they were actually worked in the way that the book seems to imply that they do. But again, Avada Kedavra is about the most creative spell that people cast in this series, so we'll have to wait for that bank heist reboot. time turners. Alright, no video would be complete without the introduction and inclusion of time turners on the list because it's the most ridiculous thing that exists in this entire series. So, before we get into it, let's ground ourselves with what we know from Hermione. Where'd you get that hourglass thing? It's called a time turner, Hermione whispered, and I got it from Professor McGonagall on our first day back. I've been using it all year to get to all my lessons. Professor McGonagall made me swear I would never tell anyone. She had to write all sorts of letters to the Ministry of Magic so I could have one. She had to tell them that I was a model student and that I'd never, ever use it for anything except my studies. I've been turning it back so I could do hours over again. That's how I've been doing several lessons at once. See? Now, I already talked about time travel magic at length in the most recent video that I did, so if you want to talk more about that or listen more about that, go watch that video. This one, I wanted to focus a little bit more specifically on the object itself. There seems to be a difference from the magic and the object that it's powering. The way I'm generally looking at it is that the time turner is a way to sort of channel that magic and make it in some way usable. In the same way that Portkeys might channel some type of teleportation magic, I think time turners channel that time magic. For instance, I think it allows the user to have a little bit more precision and control over their time traveling. Harry didn't have a clue what was going on. Dumbledore had turned on his heel and looked back as he reached the door. I'm going to lock you in. It is, he consulted his watch, 5 minutes to midnight, Miss Granger. 3 turns should do it. Good luck. I forget exactly where they go back to, like 7 o'clock or something, but there's a level of precision that the time turner allows that I don't think the raw magic allows. The previous example from Pottermore or whatever, someone went back like 3,000 years or something and messed a whole bunch of timelines up. Again, not going to talk about that here. Talking about the time turner itself. The time turner is probably host to the most plot hole conversations in the whole series. Even if I don't know that it always should get that reputation, it tends to. Which is maybe why J.K. Rowling decided to smash all of them. I went far too lightheartedly into the subject of time travel in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. While I do not regret it, Prisoner of Azkaban is one of my favorite books in the series, I opened up a vast number of problems for me, because, after all, if wizards could go back and undo problems, where were my future plots? I solved the problem to my own satisfaction in stages. Firstly, I had Dumbledore and Hermione emphasize how dangerous it would be to be seen in the past, to remind the reader that there might be unforeseen and dangerous consequences, as well as solutions in time travel. Secondly, I had Hermione give back the only time turner ever to enter Hogwarts. Thirdly, I smashed all remaining time turners during the battle in the Department of Mysteries, removing the possibility of reliving even short periods in the future. This is just one example of the ways in which, when writing fantasy novels, one must be careful what one invents. For every benefit, there is usually a drawback. Yeah. And then there's the confirmation within Half-Blood Prince that they did, in fact, smash all of them. Hermione says, "We smashed the entire stock of Ministry time turners when we were there last summer. It was in the Daily Prophet." I think I just have one problem with this, which is somebody made the time turners to begin with. They could make more of them. It's not like the Ministry of Magic isn't actively experimenting with time magic. There's the whole scene where that weird bell jar falls on the guy's head and he reverts back Benjamin Button style over and over again. It's not like this is something they're not currently doing. They didn't find a hidden stock of time turners that came from aliens or something. It's an item that they made. They could definitely make more. So I don't know exactly where to even begin. I guess one first question that I have is if there is a limit on the number of loops and iterations you can have with the time turner. Because at the very least, we know Hermione has done several at once. "But look," said Ron, laughing. "See this morning? 9 o'clock divination, and underneath, 9 o'clock Muggle studies." And Ron leaned closer to the schedule, disbelieving. "Look, underneath that, arithmancy, 9 o'clock. I mean, I know you're good, Hermione, but no one's that good. How are you supposed to be in 3 classes at once?" Now, I don't know where your head goes, but my question was, do people age faster while using this time travel magic? I mean, depending on how she was traveling back in time for classes, whether she was going back 1 class at a time or waiting till the end of the day and then traveling the whole way back again. On the extreme end, there's 200 days of school and she's living 2 extra sets of 5 hours every day for 200 days, that's like close to 3 months of extra living that whole time. Would you necessarily get older as you're doing all that? It seems like you would have to. And also, that would assume that she's living like 34-hour days at a time. If you factor in 8 hours of sleep, that means she's pulling 26-hour shifts every day for, maybe not every day, but many times. That might not be a plot hole, it just seems like unrealistic to keep that up for a long period of time. Unless, of course, you include some time loops where you just go to sleep. You spend the whole loop sleeping and catching up and then waking up and doing another loop. I mean, just stick with me here. There's a scenario where you just continue going back. You could live an entire life in a single day. Theoretically, you'd use some of those loops to sleep and some to study and, I don't know, work out or something. From the outside perspective, you would just disappear, and then for 5 hours later, you'd come back, you'd be brilliant and yoked out of your mind. You're just basically compressing time into an infinitely repeating loop until you've decided you've had enough. And with that in mind, this arbitrary 5-hour time limit seems like it doesn't actually solve any of the issues with the time turner. I'm sure it was added to avoid some of the other logical uses of the time turner. For instance, if you could just go back in time and witness a crime, like the murder of Harry's parents, you could pretty conclusively prove what happened. It would exonerate Sirius Black without really any question. You could also do the same thing for pretty much every crime, and the legal system would just be based on someone would have to go back and observe, and then you'd have the answer. I think Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling tried to make all of this go away by claiming that time travel in universe is like a flat circle.
I don't want to know anything anymore.
There is no multiverse, and whatever happens has always happened. And maybe this explains where my frustration has always been with it. Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling's method of time travel involves the assumption of a bootstrap paradox, the hallmark of which is that events that take place within this timeline don't have any definitive start or end. There isn't a first loop, so to say. So the question about how did Harry save himself with the Patronus the first time, if he was going to die the first time, if he died, he wouldn't be able to come back and cast the Patronus the second time. None of that matters because the assumption is that there is always a fixed, flat time. The potential beauty of this bootstrap paradox solution is that you tie all of your complaints and issues to this single plot hole inducing brick and throw it into the ocean. And if we all just agree that it all works based on this bootstrap paradox, you don't have to ask any more questions, no more complaints, right? Wrong. We know of several ways that things can go wrong when using time turners. For starters, Dumbledore is insistent with Hermione that she is not to be seen while using this time turner. Now, I'll admit, it might not be for any reason except for the fact that she's not supposed to be seen meddling in the Ministry of Magic and the legal affairs, and she's not supposed to be using a time turner for anything except schoolwork and everything, but she's also been told about the consequences from McGonagall as well. Harry, what do you think you'd do if you saw yourself bursting into Hagrid's house? Said Hermione. I'd think I'd gone mad, said Harry, or I'd think there was some dark magic going on. Exactly, you wouldn't understand. You might even attack yourself. Don't you see? Professor McGonagall told me what awful things have happened when wizards have meddled with time. Loads of them ended up killing their past selves or future selves by mistake. So the problem is, these warnings don't make sense or shouldn't make sense in a world where you can't alter the past or throw things off track in the future. The only way this works in fiction is if it still conforms to this bootstrap paradox. If you were to go back in time and it did cause you or your past self to Avada Kedavra, the other one, you would have to be doing that for eternity. You would get stuck in an Avada Kedavra eternity loop. You would be forced in the future to willingly go back to the past where you know either your future self or your past self is going to die, and then you would be forced to repeat that forever. It's like that Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie? Looper. Is that Joseph Gordon-Levitt? I'll fix it later. Honestly, there's no shortage of time travel related ideas to talk about here, so I kind of just need to cut myself off. Drum roll, please. Time turners are obviously, without a doubt, a 5 out of 5 apocalypse causing timeline melting magical item. The scenarios I was playing out here were for a single witch or wizard doing these things, but can you imagine an entire wizarding society doing this and everyone looping back and multiplying thousands of themselves to get smarter and lift weights? Harry only says he would have gone mad because his past self didn't know about time turners. So if you know and are aware of what time turners do and willingly enter into that situation, you wouldn't go mad. You would just be like, oh, I guess I started multiplying. Cool. You'd be free to Groundhog Day yourself for eternity. Time turners are a 5 out of 5. You can fight me on that. Before we move on to the next one, I just wanted to take a chance to say thanks for watching. If you're liking the content, you can click the subscribe button to see more of it. It helps the channel grow. It's free. Why not? I know no one subscribes to things anymore, but I appreciate it. I also have memberships active on the YouTube channel here where you can see the videos a couple days early and you get some loyalty badges and fun stuff like that. Or check me out on Patreon. Same deal, but the videos are ad-free over there. And lastly, I just started a Discord for the channel. There should be a link in the description below. And if you're a member, you get access to a member-only channel within the Discord. Also, if this video is like less than 7 days old, I think you can hype it or whatever this new thing is. I don't know what it does. No one seems to know what it does, but you can do it if you want. All right, back to the video. Polyjuice Potion. Okay, if your first thought was the Polyjuice Potion is a potion, it's not an object, that's very astute of you. Thank you for telling me, but I'm still going to talk about it now. By all accounts, the Polyjuice Potion is a perfect mimicry. It changes how you look, it changes your eyes, it changes whether or not you need glasses, it changes the way your voice sounds. Everything changes. It transforms you into somebody else. Think about it. We could change into 3 of the Slytherins. No one would know it was us. Malfoy would probably tell us anything. He's probably boasting about it in the Slytherin common room right now. If only we could hear him. This Polyjuice Potion stuff sounds a bit dodgy to me, said Ron, frowning. What if we were stuck looking like the 3 Slytherins forever? It wears off after a while, said Hermione, waving her hand impatiently, but getting hold of the recipe will be very difficult. Snape said it was in a book called Most Potent Potions, and it's bound to be in the restricted section of the library. The Polyjuice Potion is one of the most iconic things within the Harry Potter world. I'm sure there are other series that have disguising magic and potions, obviously they do, but the Polyjuice Potion is a pretty iconic one for Harry Potter. We learn about it pretty early on in the series. Then he realized that his glasses were clouding his eyes because Goyle obviously didn't need them. He took them off and called, "Are you two okay?" Goyle's low rasp of a voice issued from his mouth. "Yeah," came the deep grunt of Crabbe from his right. Aside from the fact that Hermione was able to brew this as an 11-year-old, which we'll get to in a moment, there's a couple things that I wanted to talk about. First of all, the 7-Potter Polyjuice Potion plan is the most dangerous imaginable plan. I know they all say they're worried about breaking the law at this point, but I truly don't understand. There's so many other ways you could have done this, and Hedwig would still be alive, so you know what? Instead, they opt for this bathtub moonshine Polyjuice Potion plan. Anyway, I don't know how this potion is not illegal within society. It just doesn't make any sense to have people running around willy-nilly with the ability to make this or buy it from someone. It just doesn't make any sense. And I think you get a teaser for how dangerous this could be from Sirius Black and the Goblet of Fire. He's not talking explicitly about Polyjuice Potion, but I think it's not an illogical leap to make. Imagine that Voldemort's powerful now. You don't know who his supporters are, you don't know who's working for him and who isn't. You know he can control people so that they do terrible things without being able to stop themselves. You're scared for yourself and your family and your friends. Every week, news comes out of more deaths, more disappearances, more torturing. The Ministry of Magic's in disarray. They don't know what to do. They're trying to keep everything hidden from the Muggles, but meanwhile, Muggles are dying too. Terror everywhere, panic, confusion. That's how it used to be. Obviously, he's talking about people being controlled and forced to do certain things, but I think it doesn't take a huge logical leap to assume that there's also people using Polyjuice Potions to disguise themselves and infiltrate different areas and do all sorts of presumably bad things, which is all the more reason that this potion should be completely illegal and restricted. And the ingredients should probably be watched in the same way that, you can't get Sudafed without going on a list. But regardless, let's look at some of the other problems first. So first of all, apparently the potion is supposed to be difficult to brew, and the fact that Hermione is able to is a testament to her and not to how difficult it's supposed to be. The effect of the potion is only temporary, and depending on how well it has been brewed, may last anything from between 10 minutes and 12 hours. You can change age, sex, and race by taking the Polyjuice Potion, but not species. The fact that Hermione is able to make a competent Polyjuice Potion at the age of 12 is testimony to her outstanding magical ability, because it is a potion that many adult witches and wizards fear to attempt. So, obviously, she turned into a cat the first time. So this is either a retcon to what we saw happen right away, or it's some weird middle ground. Her face was covered in black fur, her eyes had turned yellow, and there were long pointed ears poking through her hair. It was cat hair, she howled. Millicent Bulstrode must have had a cat, and the potion isn't supposed to be used for animal transformations. Hermione remained in the hospital wing for several weeks. There was a flurry of rumor about her disappearance when the rest of the school arrived back from their Christmas holidays, because, of course, everyone thought she had been attacked. So many students filed past the hospital wing trying to catch a glimpse of her that Madame Pomfrey took out her curtains again and placed them around Hermione's bed to spare her the shame of being seen with a furry face. This tells me a few things. First of all, they say it's for human use, but clearly that's more of a guideline than actual rules.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
Secondly, it seems like if it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. If a potion would normally last up to 12 hours, but in this case it lasted for several weeks, that's either A, a retcon that happened after the fact, or B, messing things up actually makes the magic somehow more powerful, which would not be completely inconsistent with other instances in the series. Lockhart, for example, wipes his own mind with Ron's broken wand, and it seems like the effect is much worse than it would have been with a functioning wand. And thirdly, the wizarding community, furry community's gotta be out of control. I'm not gonna talk about that, but anyways, I think one of the main issues here would be social erosion. I think there's no good way to go about everyday life without the complete erosion of trust in society. You can't have a secret passphrase for every person in your life, there's just no way. And you can't, by definition, have a secret passphrase for someone you don't know. So you really would start to not be able to trust anyone. So what this means is that A, being an imposter somewhere would be incredibly easy, and B, the only thing that we see that washes away or cancels out the Polyjuice Potion seems to be the thief's downfall waterfall thing in Gringotts. People don't just walk around with holy water to spray on you. This is basically the equivalent of your parents looking at fake AI posts on Facebook and believing all of them without questioning anything. It would be like that, but in real life. Always. It would be like when Twitter blue checks used to mean something, but now they mean nothing, and it's all just chaos. That's what it would be like. And so for the sheer fact of turning real life into Facebook or Twitter, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5. It is not a world that I would want to live in. The Cloak of Invisibility. The Cloak of Invisibility is perhaps one of the most recognizable items from the Harry Potter world, period. It's also one of the first to be introduced all the way back in book 1, which, surprising side note, as I was looking for these quotes, Harry doesn't get to Hogwarts until like halfway through the first book. He spends literally the first 1/3 to half of the book with the Dursleys. But I digress. Here's where he gets the cloak. I've heard of those, he said in a hushed voice, dropping the box of every flavor beans he'd gotten from Hermione. If that's what I think it is, they're really rare and really valuable. What is it? Harry picked the shining silvery cloth off the floor. It was strange to the touch, like water woven into material. It's an invisibility cloak, said Ron, a look of awe on his face. I'm sure it is. Try it on. Harry threw the cloak over his shoulders and Ron gave a yell. It is! Look down! Harry looked down at his feet, but they were gone. He dashed to the mirror. Sure enough, his reflection looked back at him, but just his head suspended in midair. His body was completely invisible. He pulled the cloak over his head and his reflection vanished completely. Obviously, this is the mythical Deathly Hallow Cloak of Invisibility and not a cheap copy, because there's plenty of other cheap copies. I don't even know if they're cheap. They're just not Deathly Hallows, but they exist in the world. We don't actually find out about the fact that it's a Deathly Hallow all the way until the book about the Deathly Hallows, where we learn about it from Luna Lovegood's dad. But the third Hallow is a true Cloak of Invisibility, Miss Granger. I mean to say it is not a traveling cloak imbued with a disillusionment charm or carrying a bedazzling hex, or else woven from demiguise hair, which will hide one initially but fade with the years until it turns opaque. We're talking about a cloak that really and truly renders the wearer completely invisible and endures eternally, giving constant and impenetrable concealment no matter what spells are cast at it. How many cloaks have you ever seen like that, Miss Granger? So the only problem is that this is billed as this mythological item that actually spectacularly fails at just about every turn. It's honestly a little bit confusing. This is Dumbledore talking about it at the end of Deathly Hallows. And the cloak. Somehow we never discussed the cloak much, Harry. Both of us could conceal ourselves well enough without the cloak. The true magic of which, of course, is that it can be used to protect and shield others as well as its owner. This is Dumbledore talking about when he and Grindelwald are searching for the Hallows, and he says that it can protect and shield others, and I don't know of a single instance where that really happened. For starters, Mad-Eye Moody can see through it, apparently. Moody took a step closer to the foot of the stairs. Harry saw Moody's magical eye travel over Snape, and then unmistakably onto himself. Harry's heart gave a horrible jolt. Moody could see through invisibility cloaks. He alone could see the full strangeness of the scene. There's a chance that this is truly an oversight and that Moody's Mad-Eye, should not have been able to see through the cloak. There's also some other theories that maybe Dumbledore is the one that made Mad-Eye Moody's eye with the Elder Wand, and maybe that's why it can see through the cloak. But regardless, the cloak doesn't seem to work very well for protecting Harry or shielding him in this case. Separately, the spell Hominem Revelio can see through it or reveal it, and it's done twice, not just by Dumbledore, but also by just some random Death Eaters. Also, Dementors can sense Harry through it. We see that in Deathly Hallows. Moving through the towering black figures was terrifying. The eyeless faces hidden beneath their hoods turned as he passed, and he felt sure that they sensed him. Sensed, perhaps, a human presence that still had some hope, some resilience. So even if they can't hunt him down, they can still sense him, so it's not like it hides his aura or whatever. The Marauders Map still shows him. We know that from Lupin. The number of times I saw James disappearing under it, said Lupin, waving an impatient hand again. The point is, even if you're wearing an invisibility cloak, you still show up on the Marauders Map. And worst of all, as Moody points out, you can't even fly with it, because it just flaps around. So he casts a disillusionment charm on Harry instead of using this so-called mythical Deathly Hallow. So if we go back, Zeno Lovegood says that it hides the users indefinitely for eternity, no matter what spells are cast at it. But there's like little to no payoff here. Malfoy casts a spell at Harry and stuns him under the cloak in like book 5 or 6. So it's clearly not able to stop spells from working. Your presence is also revealed by other spells, so I don't totally understand why this was even left in to begin with. I think more than anything, this is probably a broader commentary about how the magical world of Harry Potter has changed over the years. There were a lot of things that were introduced in book 1 that by the time we got to book 7, they just weren't congruent with the world that they were active in anymore. And that's okay, but maybe we should all just admit that sometimes. Realistically, I think the cloak probably just gave Harry too much ability to be sort of all-knowing and just spy on everything without any consequences. In some way, it had to be undermined. Otherwise, it would have just been too powerful of an artifact. But that does sort of undermine the whole Deathly Hallows part of it, and everything about it being impenetrable and everlasting and perfect. Is invisibility a good power? Yeah, but I'm also ranking this in a world where invisibility is not uncommon. In fact, it's pretty common. There are so many other ways to conceal yourself in Harry Potter that the cloak doesn't seem to be that unique at all. It's not unique. Plus, you can still be hit by spells. Plus, you can still be detected by spells. Plus, by the time Harry's in his 7th year, he barely even fits in it anymore, so it's not really made for adults. Plus, you have to hold it over your head like a bedsheet when you're using it. You can't even have your hands free to like cast spells and stuff. So yes, it does make you good at sneaking, but so does so many other things. And Harry basically only uses it for schoolyard shenanigans, not for doing anything that important. So for all those reasons, I'm giving the Cloak of Invisibility, the mythical Deathly Hallow, a 1 out of 5. The Sorting Hat. onto what is probably the other most well-known magical item from Harry Potter. We're introduced to the Sorting Hat quite early on in Harry's journey through Hogwarts. It is maybe the first thing that we see at Hogwarts. And we learn pretty early on that the hat is supposedly infallible. "It put you in Gryffindor," said Dumbledore calmly. "Listen to me, Harry. You happen to have many qualities Salazar Slytherin prized in his hand-picked students. His own very rare gift, Parseltongue, resourcefulness, determination, a certain disregard for rules," he added, his mustache quivering again. "Yet the Sorting Hat placed you in Gryffindor. You know why that was. Think." "It only put me in Gryffindor," said Harry in a defeated voice, "because I asked not to go in Slytherin." "Exactly," said Dumbledore, beaming once more, "which makes you very different from Tom Riddle. It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." So supposedly the Sorting Hat is able to see who someone truly is. So Peter Pettigrew might be an anomaly in that what he admired is not what he truly intended or wanted to become. But that's not exactly what I wanted to talk about with the Sorting Hat. I had some other topics in mind. So first of all, I think it's weird that the hat is completely sentient sometimes and then a complete inanimate object in others. Basically, every time that they pull the sword of Gryffindor out of the hat, it's just a hat. And then other times it has sentience and can talk to Harry. But the other thing I want to talk about is that I'm fairly certain it is pretty much causing all of the problems within the series. It creates 4 echo chambers of like-minded people and forces them to stay together. It is basically your social media algorithm, but in the form of schoolhouses. There is a quote where the Sorting Hat seems to realize this, and basically all of his songs seem to indicate that it knows it's causing the problems that are occurring. But this is another song that it has. Said Slytherin, "Will teach just those whose ancestry is purest." Said Ravenclaw, "Will teach those whose intelligence is surest." Said Gryffindor, "Will teach all those with brave deeds to their name." Said Hufflepuff, "I'll teach the lot and treat them just the same." This it brings up when it says it's absorbed all of their ideals, which one of those is not like the others. What actually is the worst case here? I guess you have some potential for the equivalent of like the Wizarding World PTO, having them be outraged with the placement of their student because, you know, there's a whole house dedicated to like cult members and terrible people. And if you put your student in there, you're basically condemning them to a life of that. They might get pretty upset about that, but there's plenty of other things that you should probably be suing Hogwarts over, like the fact that detention means sending your kid into the Forbidden Forest where there's giant spiders that clearly want to kill them. But I think potentially the most interesting application of the Sorting Hat and its capabilities relates to its mind-reading capability. We don't really know how deep or what exactly the hat is doing. We don't know if it's just a personality thing or if it's something more. We know from J.K. Rowling that it can sense parts of the soul for some reason, because that's what it senses in Harry. It senses the part of Voldemort's soul that is within him. So it might be more accurate to say that it's reading souls and not reading minds. It seems like there's quite a few ramifications due to that fact. For example, this seems like it would have been useful in all sorts of legal trials. You just put the hat on someone's head and it could tell you, essentially like a polygraph test, but with a hat. I know they have truth potion whatever as well, which we'll get to. Or like, what if they put it on Barty Crouch Jr.'s head? Would it have been able to tell that it was a fake? If you put it on anyone's head that's using a Polyjuice Potion, would it be able to tell you the difference? This is also probably a potential contender for like the worst job interview process ever. All in, this is a 1 out of 5. On to the next. Liquid Luck. I put out a poll a few weeks ago, and it's probably the most votes I've ever received on anything. There's almost 6,000 of you voted on whether or not Liquid Luck is well explained or not so much. Spoiler alert, 5,000 of you don't think it's well explained. So this is a bit of a doozy. Buckle up. We'll start with the description from Slughorn in Half-Blood Prince. Yes, that. Well, that one, ladies and gentlemen, is a most curious little potion called Felix Felicis. I take it, he turned, smiling to look at Hermione, who had let out an audible gasp, that you know what Felix Felicis does, Miss Granger. It's liquid luck, said Hermione excitedly. It makes you lucky. Quite right. Take another 10 points for Gryffindor. Yes, it's a funny little potion, Felix Felicis, said Slughorn. Desperately tricky to make and disastrous to get wrong. However, if brewed correctly, as this has been, you will find that all your endeavors tend to succeed, at least until the effects wear off. I think right off the bat, there's some ambiguity in that statement alone. He says that your efforts tend to succeed. Who knows what tend means in this case? If it's 100% tend to exceed or 50%, it's not clear. Luckily, we have an example of someone using it not all that much later in the book. Unfortunately though, I don't know that it really clears up all that much and maybe just adds more questions to the mix. Let's look at a few of the instances when it's used and see what we can extract from that. Excellent, he said, really excellent. Right, I'm going down to Hagrid's. What? Said Ron and Hermione together, looking aghast. No, Harry, you've got to go see Slughorn, remember? Said Hermione. No, said Harry confidently, I'm going to Hagrid's. I've got a good feeling about going to Hagrid's. You've got a good feeling about burying a giant spider? Asked Ron, looking stunned. Yeah, said Harry, pulling his invisibility cloak out of his bag. I feel like it's the place to be tonight. You know what I mean? So, okay, obviously we know where this goes. Harry happens to run into Slughorn, and then Slughorn accompanies Harry to Hagrid's, eventually spilling the secret. But how did Harry know that, and what did luck have to do with any of it? That's an open question. We'll come back to it later. When he's down there with Slughorn, the Felix Felicis gave Harry a little nudge at this point, and he noticed that the supply of drink that Slughorn had brought was running out fast. Harry had not yet managed to bring off the refilling charm without saying the incantation aloud, but the idea that he might not be able to do it tonight was laughable. Indeed, Harry grinned to himself as, unnoticed by either Hagrid or Slughorn, now swapping tales of illegal trade in dragon eggs, he pointed his wand under the table at the emptying bottles and then immediately began to refill. So here's another example of Harry doing something that he couldn't previously do, or at least hadn't done previously. And the last effect I want to add to the bunch here is when Neville and some of the others take the leftover Felix Felicis later on towards the end of the book. Neville and Professor Flitwick are both hurt, but Madame Pomfrey says they'll be all right. And the Death Eater's dead. He got hit by a killing curse. That huge blonde one was firing off everywhere. Harry, if we hadn't used your Felix potion, I think we'd all have been killed, but everything seemed to just miss us. Okay, so we got three things going on. Harry somehow has this omniscient prediction that he should go down to Hagrid's where he'll find Slughorn. He pulls off some things that he couldn't normally pull off, and then also it seems to make other people's spells miss. So let's go one by one. The Hagrid one is a little bit confusing to explain because I imagine being lucky as purposely trying for something and then achieving that despite the odds, potentially. Him going to Hagrid's seems completely unrelated to Slughorn and more just like the fates provided for him in this instance. Him casting a spell that he's never cast before non-verbally, going smoothly. Again, understandably, luck, not a problem. Those ones are almost entirely dependent on Harry himself doing something. And so I think where it starts to get confusing is when you start pulling in other people. For example, when Ron and Hermione dodge killing curses because of taking Felix Felicis, are they better at dodging, or is it making the other people miss? Another example involving other people is the fact that Harry can walk out of the school and Filch has forgotten to lock the front doors. It's a small thing, but it seems like another example of the potion itself affecting the entire situation, not just Harry's luck. Honestly, I think the only way this makes sense in fiction is if it purely relies on the individual that took the potion and not the external people around them, because if it didn't, you know what the luckiest thing for Harry would be? If Voldemort just accidentally left all the coordinates of the Horcruxes out for him, but that doesn't happen, so you have to assume there's some sort of limit based solely on the person that took the potion. There's this funny thing that happens in the book where directly after Slughorn introduces the concept of the liquid luck, all the students start asking questions that seem directly pointed at everyone reading the book and saying, that seems like it's a thing that they should do all the time, doesn't it? Immediately after, there's an ask, why don't people drink it all the time, sir? Said Terry Boot eagerly. Because if taken in excess, it causes giddiness, recklessness, and dangerous overconfidence, said Slughorn. Too much of a good thing, you know. Highly toxic in large quantities, but taken sparingly and very occasionally, and he trails off. It's very clearly written in the book this way so that everyone reading it and going, that seems like it's going to cause problems, has this little snippet in here to plaster over any of the potential issues. Not too far later in the book, you might also be thinking, they really should just make more of it to use it more often, right? And not too much later, that direct question is answered. Couldn't we make some more? Ron asked Harry, ignoring Hermione. It'd be great to have a stock of it. Have a look in the book. Harry pulled his copy of Advanced Potion Making out of his bag and looked up Felix Felicis. Blimey, it's seriously complicated, he said, running an eye down the list of ingredients. And it takes 6 months. You've got to let it stew. Okay, it kind of heads off your question that says, oh, they should just have more of it and take it more often. But I think a lot of this topic hinges on how common this potion actually is. That's sort of the confounding factor here. On one hand, J.K. Rowling wants you to believe that it's incredibly rare and incredibly difficult to make. On the other hand, it's common enough to be given away to the best 6-year student for being a good potion maker that day. So which one is it? It's not like it's never been seen before. It's obviously a somewhat uncommon, difficult spell to make. It's rare, it's hard to acquire, but it's certainly not the only vial of it in existence, which means more people should be using it more often. There is literally no reason not to, or at the very least, have an emergency stash on hand. Every member of the Order of the Phoenix should have a tiny little vial, just in case they get trapped somewhere and need to make it out of the dangerous situation. While it may be difficult to make, and it might take 6 months to prepare some, they have time. They also have probably one of the best potion makers ever, Snape, on their team. He could brew some. Dumbledore, I'm sure, could brew some. Truthfully, there should be Death Eaters that are brewing their own and using it. There's literally no reason not to have more of it. Also, you should just take some while you're making it so that you can make more. Maybe you make better luck potion while you're on Felix Felicis. Honestly, I said Snape probably should be making it for both sides. Dumbledore should have him making it, and there should be like a scene where Snape's actually tricking the Death Eaters and giving them like bad Felix Felicis, and they are just minorly unlucky all the time. That would actually explain quite a bit about Harry getting away most of the time. About everything, I think it really just needs a better payoff. It seems frustrating when the plot moves forward because of someone being lucky. That's not an engaging way to move the plot forward. I wish that the luck had some sort of drawback to it. Like, for example, you were lucky for a day, but you used all the luck up for the rest of the month. Or maybe taking it multiple times could eventually steal your life force or something. And maybe if you take it more than once, it kills you. I don't know, like literally anything to make it higher stakes than just take potion, good things happen. Because then you end up in this situation where there's no downside to having it. No matter how rare it is, you might as well keep trying to make more. In lieu of the fact that the consequences of Slughorn says it's disastrous if you get it wrong, we don't really know what disastrous means. Does that mean you just have bad luck? Does it kill you? What are the stakes there? It was so close to being a high stakes thing, but now we're just left with potion makes things better with no downside. Also, the fact that it is not illegal in any way. It's banned in competition, so obviously it works. It's not like there's any chance that this is all a placebo effect. It's banned, so clearly there's some reason why it's banned. But the fact that it's not illegal means that there would definitely be home brewers everywhere, like the wizarding subreddit equivalent of Felix Felicis, I don't know, sending like letters to each other about their recipes would definitely be a thing, because the stakes are so monumentally high if you get it right. If you come up with the best way to make liquid luck, not only would you be extraordinarily wealthy, you would just have the best luck forever. There's just no reason not to be spending more time working on this, period. There's not like pharmaceutical companies, I guess, in the wizarding world, but they would light the recipe for Ozempic on fire if they could have liquid luck as like a daily multivitamin. It's not like it's that hard to take a pill every day, especially if that pill is making everything work for you. Honestly, you would probably have like an insulin pump attached to you all the time, just pumping liquid luck constantly. What even happens to society if everyone is extraordinarily lucky all the time? Maybe you end up in a utopia, maybe that collapses the universe, I don't know. Regardless, this is a 5 out of 5. This is completely overpowered and underexplained, and I really just wish there was some stakes to it. I wish it worked, but there was a drawback. That would make all this so much more palatable. Ford Anglia. The Ford Anglia is an interesting topic to bring up here. Mainly less so about the car itself and more about the implications of the car and everything that surrounds it. The car obviously starts out as a pretty normal, bewitched item, but quickly takes a turn as soon as Ron and Harry crash it into the Whomping Willow. "Reverse," Harry yelled, and the car shot backward. The tree was still trying to hit them. They could hear its roots creaking as if it almost ripped itself up, lashing out at them as they sped out of reach. "That," panted Ron, "was close. Well done, car." The car, however, had reached the end of its tether. With two sharp clunks, the doors flew open, and Harry felt his seat tip sideways. Next thing he knew, he was sprawled on the damp ground. Loud thuds told him that the car was ejecting their luggage from the trunk. Hedwig's cage flew through the air and burst open. She rose out of it with an angry screech and sped off towards the castle without a backward look. Then, dented, scratched, and steaming, the car rumbled off into the darkness, its rear lights blazing angrily. So, I've talked about this a few times, I'll probably talk about it a few more times, but really some of this comes down to the idea that earlier books in the series were a lot more playful, and the magic didn't have the consequences that it did later on in the series. So when it's for comic relief that the car boots them out, I don't know that anyone, J.K. Rowling included, was considering the long-term implications of that happening. For example, later on, when they're in the Forbidden Forest, the car seems to be quite sentient, almost like a pet dog. It's even referred to as a dog within the chapter. Mr. Weasley's car was standing empty in the middle of a circle of thick trees under a roof of dense branches, its headlights ablaze. As Ron walked open-mouthed toward it, it slowly moved toward him, exactly like a large turquoise dog greeting its owner. Mr. Weasley's car was thundering down the slope, headlights glaring, its horns screeching, knocking spiders aside. Several were thrown onto their backs, their endless legs waving in the air. The car screeched to a halt in front of Harry and Ron, and the doors flew open. They sped up the slope out of the hollow, and they were soon crashing through the forest, branches whipping the windows as the car wound its way cleverly through the widest gaps, following a path it obviously knew. The car is clearly being described, or at least compared to a living being. It's not just a car that's acting like it's living, it seems to be thinking and making choices on its own. Which kind of begs the question, why is this happening? Surely Arthur didn't plan on making the car sentient. I think all he wanted to do was add some bits and bobs to it. Make it fly, make it turn invisible, make it fit more stuff in it. I don't think that he planned to make it sentient in any way. The car is later described in Goblet of Fire as running wild in the Forbidden Forest, so at some point it has just become a living being in the eyes of Harry and Ron. Really, it makes me wonder if sentience, at least in the magical sense, is something that emerges once more and more spells are stacked up on top of something. Maybe a single spell that makes the car fly isn't enough to do that, but the more things that you pile into this object, the more in touch it becomes with the Force, to the point where it gains a will of its own. And maybe that's the will of the magic, or maybe it's the will of the car. Who's to say? Although it seems to be acting out of self-preservation, which would imply it's the will of the car, not the will of the all-encompassing magic. Either Arthur is an incredible inventor, or sentience emerging from magical objects is not that uncommon. Which, honestly, as you look around, seems to kind of be the case. We have things like the Marauders Map, the Sorting Hat, maybe the Goblet of Fire to an extent. There's a bunch of objects that seem to follow their own will, not in some sort of pre-programmed way like the wizard chess pieces do.
He's going to sacrifice himself. No, you can't!
But in their own self-preservatory, sentient way. As I was thinking about ranking this, one, I think there should probably be more sentient things running around, and I think, unfortunately, the way we see wizards treat other races within the story, those objects would probably also be treated pretty poorly. And I don't really know what the ethics of any of that is. I think you'd end up with yet another permanent underclass that serves the wizards in this society. Honestly, I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 5 just for the sort of ethics part of this. This was a hard one to rank. Let's move on to the next one. The Marauders Map. Sometimes when you're reading or rereading the Harry Potter books, something starts to stick out to you that it really feels like so often J.K. Rowling introduces a tool for Harry just for the purpose of moving the plot along. The Cloak of Invisibility in book 1, or the Polyjuice Potion, or Liquid Luck. These things just sort of pop up for Harry, and they seem like they're unrelated, but then he uses them 17,000 times in each book to move things along. One more of these is the Marauders Map. As described by Pottermore, the magic used in the map's creation is advanced and impressive. It includes the homunculus charm, enabling the possessor of the map to track the movements of every person in the castle. It was also enchanted to forever repel, as insultingly as possible, the curiosity of their nemesis, Severus Snape. In a similar conversation as the previous entry about the Ford to Anglia, we don't have to retread it, but it does make me wonder what level of sentience is involved here. The fact that it's called the homunculus charm
Human transmutation is strictly forbidden.
seems very much like it's hinting at the sentience of the object as a facsimile of a human being or a soul or something. I don't know. There's a level of sentience there that's implied by the name of that spell alone. Regardless of the fact that it says it's in charm to specifically insult Snape, it feels like it is specifically insulting the person that's talking to them, not specifically Snape, which would also imply some level of sentience and an ability to understand who's trying to get access. Regardless, I do have a few questions that are maybe plot holes or inconveniences. I don't totally know. They're not plot holes, but let me bring them up. First of all, more of a question, I guess. When Snape manages to see the map that's been left open, would he have seen 2 Harrys and 2 Hermiones on the map? They should have been using the time turner around that time, and while he definitely would have seen the people down by the Shrieking Shack, that's a ways off from the castle. There wouldn't have been many other footprints or students in the area. I don't think they can just willy-nilly go out there like that all the time. So it would have been quite obvious that, oh, there's like 2 footprints over there and 2 footprints over there. Weird, there's 2 Harrys and 2 Hermiones on here. Maybe that wouldn't have meant anything to him, but a thought experiment more than anything. The bigger plot hole, I'm not gonna bring up the Fred and George thing because that's been beaten to death. Would Fred and George have seen Ron sleeping next to Peter Pettigrew every night? J.K. Rowling has her own explanation about why that wasn't the case, and there's too many names, and they didn't know all the first years, yada yada. Harry has the Marauders Map before Scabbers / Peter Pettigrew goes missing. He definitely would have explored the map with Ron while Ron had Scabbers. They would have definitely looked at it in the common room or something and been like, look at this cool map that your brothers gave me. Oh, weird, your rat is with you. Why is his name Peter Pettigrew? I understand that maybe they wouldn't have known who Peter Pettigrew was, but it still feels odd to me because it would have been very easy to understand that the rat was being labeled as Peter Pettigrew. You could move the rat across the room and it would move on the map. It'd be very obvious to prove. Some other unique things about the map that I am curious about. I'm kind of surprised that Dumbledore shows up on it. I would have thought that he, being the all-powerful Dumbledore and being 3 steps ahead of everybody all the time, would have had some sort of enchantment around himself to stop his name from showing up on magic stuff like that. And that's kind of part of a different question altogether that I have, which is that it's not really a question, it's more of an observation. Harry Potter doesn't seem to have quite as many magical wards or active protection spells. There's obviously the sacrificial love spell that's around Harry that is always active, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of ways to cast protective passive spells around yourself. There's a couple that I can think of. There's ways to silence your surrounding area so that when the trio is camping in the woods, people can't hear them, but there doesn't seem to be passive physical damage protection spells that go on. This is now my standard call out to Aragon and the magic system that Christopher Polini wrote. I don't know, maybe there's just a ton of random plot conveniences spread throughout this. You can't apparate to Hogwarts, but sometimes you can send a portkey to it. You can hide from people under the Cloak of Invisibility, but the Marauders Map can see through the Cloak of Invisibility. I don't know, it's all seemingly just whatever's convenient to move things forward. I do also wonder if it's possible. It seems possible. It seems plausible that there should be examples of the Marauders Map for other spaces. Honestly, it'd probably be easier to make Marauders Maps of other places. You clearly don't need to know everyone that's walking around the halls because the map was made years and years and years ago and it still works in the present day. So you could make it work anywhere and track anyone, which kind of just turns things into weird low trust society situations like that. All in, I'm giving this a 2 out of 5. I don't think it's really all that harmful or powerful. It would make stalking people really easy, I guess. Again, there's probably easier ways to do it than with the Marauders Map. 2 out of 5. love potions. This was a pretty often requested one, probably for obvious reasons. This is also probably the most ethically dubious of them all. Again, for obvious reasons. We'll start as usual with the text. It's amortensia. It's a mortentia. It's a mortensia. Tentia. Forgive me in advance. I don't know if it's amortentia or amortentia. I don't know. Someone's gonna correct me. It's amortentia. It is indeed. It seems almost foolish to ask, said Slughorn, who was looking mightily impressed, but I assume you would know what it does. It's the most powerful love potion in the world, said Hermione. Quite right. You recognize it, I suppose, by its distinctive mother-of-pearl sheen, and the steam rising in characteristic spirals, said Hermione enthusiastically, and it's supposed to smell differently to each of us, according to what attracts us, and I can smell freshly mown grass and new parchment and... But she turned slightly pink and did not complete the sentence. Amortentia doesn't really create love, of course. It's impossible to manufacture or imitate love. No, this will simply cause a powerful infatuation or obsession. It is probably the most dangerous and powerful potion in this room. Oh yes. So again, this is a situation where J.K. Rowling's kind of acknowledging how maybe much of a problem this should be, but we're gonna play it down because it's still a kid's book, I guess. I think this whole point hinges around how well these potion works, which by all accounts seems to be incredibly well and only more so with more time. That said, it's even backed up in the Tales of Beetle the Bard that love potions and an eternal love potion can't and has never been made. Of course, the centuries-old trade in love potions shows that our fictional wizard is hardly alone in seeking to control the unpredictable course of love. The search for a true love potion continues to this day, but no such elixir has been created, and leading potioneers doubt that it is possible. Hector Dagworth Granger, founder of the Most Extraordinary Society of Potioneers, explains, powerful infatuations can be induced by the skillful potioneer, but never yet has anyone managed to create the truly unbreakable, eternal, unconditional attachment that alone can be called love. I also want to call out here that there's this conversation that seems to come up a lot. Maybe it's a misunderstanding that Voldemort can't love because he was conceived under the effects of a love potion, which I don't think is correct. It's a misinterpretation of a quote from J.K. Rowling. She says that it's a symbolic way to say that he comes from a loveless union, not that he physically can't love anyone because of the love potion, which all but confirms that Dumbledore's theory in The Half-Blood Prince is the reality. Again, this is guesswork, said Dumbledore, but I believe that Merope, who was deeply in love with her husband, could not bear to continue enslaving him by magical means. I believe that she made the choice to stop giving him the potion. Perhaps, besotted as she was, she had convinced herself that he would now have fallen in love with her in return. Perhaps she thought he would stay for the baby's sake. If so, she was wrong on both counts. He left her, never saw her again, and never troubled to discover what became of his son. With all this, we know a few things. One, perhaps obviously, you can just continue to feed someone a love potion in perpetuity and it will continue to work, which is not that big of a stretch. If someone is obsessed with you, I don't even think you'd have to hide the fact that you were drugging them because they would willingly take whatever food or drink you gave them. You wouldn't have to trick them. Maybe you trick them the first time, I guess. That's how Merope does it, but you wouldn't have to keep doing it. They would just keep drinking whatever you gave them. So the chase for the eternal love potion, in actuality, maybe you can't make one, but in practice, you just keep giving people potions every day and it'll just keep working. More than anything, I think the love potion is grounds for such a weird conversation about ethics in Harry Potter. I know this was written for children but I don't know, like it's the 6th book at this point, and we're talking about people very obviously smuggling love potions in with the help of the Weasleys who are selling them to them, with the express purpose of drugging Harry and coercing him. So, I mean, it's a kid's book, but like again, that's just kind of a weird look. I don't know. While it might not have the same effects as the Imperious Curse, it is essentially another way to completely control somebody. It's maybe less violent, and they might be less capable of doing things while they're infatuated with you, but they'll basically do whatever you ask. I don't know what the limits of that infatuation are. Would someone put themselves in harm's way on behalf of that infatuation? I don't know. Seems like probably they would, which is not a great look. if we're honest. I also wonder if there's like toned down versions of the love potion, like just friendship potions. This is basically just like a stand-in for alcohol, I guess, maybe at the end of the day, like something that makes like social gatherings less awkward for everyone. The love potion has many limitations to it. There's continuous upkeep. You have to keep brewing it constantly. If you forget, it would end pretty terribly, but it's openly used and sold so often throughout the series that it makes me question the broader ethics of the society. It wouldn't necessarily break everything down there, but I think there's some probably broader implications if it's used as frequently as it's implied. So I'm giving this a 3 out of 5. The Philosopher's Stone. Up next, we have another very early entry into the series, the namesake of the original book. Usually you have to be careful with these items. I've mentioned this a few times now, but they don't always seem to be introduced into the story in a way that is cohesive with where it goes by the end of book 7. So first, a little bit of history. She pushed the book toward them, and Harry and Ron read. The ancient study of alchemy is concerned with making the Sorcerer's Stone, Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance with astonishing powers. The stone will transform any metal into pure gold. It also produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. There have been many reports of the Philosopher's Stone over the centuries, but the only stone currently in existence belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and opera lover. Mr. Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year, enjoys a quiet life in Devon with his wife, Pernell, 658. I know someone's gonna be upset about the sorcerer versus the philosopher thing, but just chill. One of the biggest issues I have is with Voldemort's use or intended use of the stone. Dumbledore claims that Voldemort would have been dependent on the stone and therefore wouldn't have wanted to use it regardless, even if he was trying pretty hard to get it in the first book. But really I have to question whether or not Voldemort would have been dependent on the elixir of life to begin with. I think he very clearly wanted the stone, even up through book 4. Then, 4 years ago, the means of my return seemed assured. A wizard, young, foolish, and gullible, wandered across my path in the forest I had made my home. Oh, he seemed to be the very chance I had been dreaming of, for he was a teacher at Dumbledore's school. He was easy to bend to my will. He brought me back to this country, and after a while, I took possession of his body to supervise him closely as he carried out my orders. But my plan failed. I did not manage to steal the Sorcerer's Stone, Philosopher's Stone. I was not to be assured immortal life. I was thwarted once again by Harry Potter. Maybe this is a more broad question about immortality, especially in Voldemort's case. I think we're all under the assumption that if Harry did nothing, Voldemort would have essentially achieved that immortality he was looking for. But like, would his physical body continue to age? Would he have to create a new vessel for himself every, 60 years, and transfer to a new body each time? Like, the Horcruxes would keep his soul tethered to the earth, I guess, but the body seems like it would degrade over time, which implies that the Sorcerer's Stone would have been a fine solution, because that problem hasn't been alleviated one way or the other. If he doesn't have the elixir of life, he still is going to have a body that probably ages over time, and he obviously won't be killed, but he'll have to find a new vessel. The elixir of life would have kind of solved that part of it, I think. Maybe. In book 1, the elixir of life and the Philosopher's Stone is treated as the sort of holy grail that's going to solve Voldemort's problems. But by book 6, it's kind of like, oh, no, actually, sorry, no. That's not how Horcruxes work. Never mind. Even though this whole series is about immortality and we kind of introduced the way to be immortal in book 1, we're just gonna pretend like it's not actually the same type of immortality. It's different. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that in Nicholas Flamel's 600 and whatever years of life, he didn't share the recipe with anyone or get it stolen. I mean, he was very publicly an immortal person, the only immortal people. And it very obviously was because of the Philosopher's Stone that he alone was able to create. So he's described as being a frail old man by the end. I don't know how no one was in there interrogating him or stealing the recipe from him somehow. Did he just luck out? Maybe he took some liquid luck and that's what gave him the Philosopher's Stone in the first place. I don't know. It seems pretty selfish, honestly, to not share the elixir of life with other people. Or like, I don't know, you have a thing that doesn't have too many drawbacks, it seems like. You have a way of making infinite gold. I don't know that the Harry Potter Wizarding World cares too much about hyperinflation, but you have a way to make gold, I guess. But it feels like something you would want to share. Like, I have the cure for cancer in the form of this potion that will just let you live forever. Why would you not share that? Everyone would live forever. Everyone would have a ton of gold. J.K. Rowling would probably still need to make the Weasleys poor somehow, so there would be a different currency, like Justin Timberlake in time, or whatever. Is it called in time? Timer? I'm mixing up Looper and In Time. The Weasleys would be poor in time, maybe. I'm gonna give this one a 3 out of 5, mainly because of the difficulty in creating a new one. It seems really, really difficult, if not impossible, to make one, aside from the one that was made, so likely you're not gonna have more examples of it, and that's really limiting all the other knock-on effects that you would see. So, 3 out of 5. The Resurrection Stone. Onto another Deathly Hallow. One of those mythical items that surely, this is not a spoiler that I'm not going to give it a 5 out of 5, but no spoilers. The Resurrection Stone may very well be the most useless item I have ever come across in a story. Don't let me get ahead of myself. Let's start from the beginning. We have a couple examples of it being used, but really not all that many. He knew it had happened because he heard slight movements around him that suggested frail bodies shifting their footing on the earthy, twig-strewn ground that marked the outer edge of the forest. He opened his eyes and looked around. They were neither ghost nor truly flesh. He could see that. They resembled most closely the riddle that had escaped from the diary so long ago, and he had been memory made nearly solid. Less substantial than living bodies, but much more than ghosts. They moved toward him, and on each face there was the same loving smile. The tricky part with the Resurrection Stone is it's really not clear what it actually does. Some people think that it's happening entirely within Harry's head, and they have some good reasons to believe that. "You'll stay with me until the very end," said James. "They won't be able to see you?" asked Harry. "We are part of you," said Sirius. "Invisible to anyone else." But then in the very next line, there is a physical effect that's talked about. Harry looked at his mother. "Stay close to me," he said quietly, and he set off. The Dementor's chill did not overcome him. He passed through it with his companions, and they acted like Patronuses to him. So on one hand, they're just figments of his imagination, they're memories personified, but on the other hand, they do have physical, tangible effects. Maybe this is because the Dementors are like this weird soul-based magic, and the fact that they act as Patronus is just like, it makes him so happy that they don't come near him, I guess? But again, so much of this hinges on whether or not these are actual souls returning from the dead, or shades of memories that are being given form and shape. But that said, I don't know why they would make a point to include the fact that the people that come back appear to be sad about being back if they weren't, in some way, shape, or form, related to the actual soul of the person in question. It's clear that if this is just like a pet rock that helps you think fond memories of your past loved ones, I'm not going to rank it very high, but what if it was more powerful? At first I was thinking, it doesn't really matter that there's only one of them, it doesn't really have that much effect on anything, but then I thought, if this actually is, in some way, shape, or form, bringing back a soul from the dead, that says a lot more about maybe this veil between life and death is not as concrete as the series wants you to believe. If you make the assumption or come to the conclusion that it wasn't actually death personified that made the Deathly Hallows and it was in fact human wizard inventors, that means that they in some way were able to do magic that brought souls back from the afterlife. If you are able to take that step canonically, then you're really only a couple steps away in canon from a world where immortality is real and you can bring people back from the dead. You just need to do a little bit more experimenting. This is not really all that untrue. I mean, Harry comes back from the dead. This is not ridiculous posturing. I think it's actually possible, and they just haven't explored enough magic to make it happen yet. I'm talking about like new spells and stuff. The rock is just one example of a magically imbued object. So it's really not all that different than looking through an old photo album. So I'm gonna give the Deathly Hallow Resurrection Stone Part 2 Electric Boogaloo a 1 out of 5. Floo Network. Okay, onto yet another mode of transportation here. I did a little poll about this, and I don't know what the results were. As of about 3,000 votes, the Floo Network is in third place with about 9% of the votes. So not a very common way of preferring to travel, but I think potentially quite an underrated one. Now, there are a lot of instructions, as we see in the Chamber of Secrets. You must speak clearly, dear, Miss Weasley told Harry as George dipped his hand into the flower pot, and be sure to get out at the right grate. The right what? Said Harry nervously as the fire roared and whipped George out of sight too. Well, there are an awful lot of wizard fires to choose from, you know, but as long as you've spoken clearly, he'll be fine, Molly, don't fuss, said Mr. Weasley, helping himself to the Floo powder too. But dear, if he gets lost, how would we ever explain to his aunt and uncle? They wouldn't mind, Harry reassured her. Dudley would think it was a brilliant joke if I got lost up a chimney. Don't worry about that. Well, all right. You go after Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley. Now, when you get into the fire, say where you're going. And keep your elbows tucked in, Ron advised. And your eyes shut, said Mrs. Weasley. The soot, don't fidget, said Ron, or you might fall out the wrong fireplace. But don't panic and get out too early. Wait until you see Fred and George. So there are so many rules that it does seem somewhat complicated, but I do think, again, this is an instance where you have to take into the account that this is like 12-year-old Harry being told about this new way of traveling magically for the very first time, so it's understandably confusing to him. I don't think it's actually probably that difficult when you're an adult wizard that has a lot of experience doing it. Let's think a little bit about what's actually happening here. My main question, similar to the Portkey question, is what is the magic that's happening? Is it a form of apparition, or is it something completely different, some fundamentally different magic that's being used here? My guess is that it's actually maybe quite a bit closer to Portkeys than it is to apparition. I might suggest that Portkeys and the Floo Network are cousins, whereas apparition is maybe an entirely separate school of magic. The way that moving through Portkeys and moving through the Floo Network are often described, they are quite similar, always with the spinning and discombobulation. The only difference is that the Floo Network connects you to predetermined points, basically like a subway system. That is the way that it's shown over and over again, like at the Ministry of Magic. People are taking it in as if they're riding the subway to work. I do have one question though. Is the entire network all connected to each other, or are there spots that you can't get to from other places? Harry ends up in Nocturne Alley, which is confusing to say the least, because when you watch the movie, they make it sound like he just can't talk. He says like diagonally. Diagonally. Which is a ridiculous mistake to make. Whereas in the book, it's because he's like coughing and he kind of sputters, and then maybe he sticks his elbow out and that's what makes him get off at the wrong place. It's really not clear. That said, when Mrs. Weasley finds him again, she says, Mrs. Weasley now came galloping into view, her handbag swinging wildly in one hand, Ginny just clinging onto the other. Oh, Harry, oh my dear, you could have been anywhere. Obviously, this is like a worried mother talking to Harry, but it does make me wonder, could he have actually ended up anywhere? Like, could he have accidentally missed London completely and it ended up at a Floo Network in Albania or something? Like, what's the limits to how far the Floo can take you? Because it seems like you can go pretty much anywhere as long as you just keep riding it. My guess is that there's some sort of limiting factor in here. I think like Harry kind of messed up and maybe like went a little bit too far, and that's how he ended up at Nocturne Alley. But like, what if he just kept going? Could you just keep riding it, or would it spit you out somewhere automatically? The other interesting part about the Floo Network is that there does seem to be a lot of tracking and monitoring going on. Very well, Potter, I will take your word for it this time, but be warned, the might of the Ministry stands behind me. All channels of communication in and out of this school are being monitored. A Floo Network regulator is keeping watch over every fire in Hogwarts, except my own, of course. My inquisitorial squad is opening and reading all owl posts entering and leaving the castle, and Mr. Filch is observing all secret passages in and out of the castle. I don't know why Umbridge chose to like do a villain talk and just give away the fact that her fireplace isn't under observation, but whatever. I understand that if they know the starting place of a Floo entrance and exit, they could probably make some assumptions about who is using it, but like if someone uses the Floo at the Weasley's house, it probably was a Weasley, is the assumption they would make, but that doesn't seem to be foolproof in any sense of the word. Plenty of people could come over and use their fireplace to travel. So it makes me wonder if there is some sort of tracking system that they can individually track different witches and wizards based on like a magic signature or something. I don't know. Tracking is brought up in a lot of different instances in the series, but is not expanded on or really talked about in depth. Another problem with the Floo Network that I wanted to talk about is that they seem to be able to be set up anywhere without anyone's permission to any fireplace. Yes, sorry about that, said Mr. Weasley, lowering his hand and looking over his shoulder at the blasted fireplace. It's all my fault. It just didn't occur to me that we wouldn't be able to get out at the other end. I had your fireplace connected to the Floo Network, you see, just for an afternoon, you know, so we could get Harry. Muggle fireplaces aren't supposed to be connected, strictly speaking, but I've got a useful contact at the Floo regulation panel and he fixed it for me. I can put it right back in a jiffy though, don't worry. I'll light a fire and send the boys back, and then I can repair your fireplace before I disapparate. So certainly no issues there with just being able to randomly connect any fireplace you want without consent. Not only can the Ministry of Magic surveil every fireplace that's connected, they can also just connect your fireplace at will. As a side note, maybe for my UK viewers out there, do you just have bigger fireplaces or something? Because all of our fireplaces are like 2 feet tall in the US. So is that a thing in the UK? Do you just have bigger fireplaces? At some point in this scene, I think Arthur, George, Fred, and Ron are all in the fireplace together. There's just no chance there's enough room in an American fireplace for that to happen, but maybe it's different in Europe? I don't know. Let me know. Speaking of Floo networks going into other people's houses, I don't even think that you need permission to go any specific place in the Floo network. I think you can just say the location and you'll go there. So seeing as how most witches and wizards, I guess, have their fireplaces connected, I think most people could just go to any house they wanted, no questions asked. And again, unless the ministry literally knows through some magical imprint who broke and entered, I don't think there's any way to stop that from happening, or even any follow-up if they were able to sneak in, burgle your house, and then disapparate or use the Floo network back out of your house. The fact that the Wizarding Society isn't just like a lawless land is beyond wild to me. All that said, the Floo network seems to require the use of a fireplace, so it's not the most practical of travel methods. Anyway, because of the weird surveillance issues that this uncovers and the fact that you could pretty much travel by Floo anywhere that you wanted, I'm giving this a 3 out of 5. Veritaserum. This was another often requested topic to discuss. Truth serum and all the ways that it probably should have been used throughout the series. Let's start with the description from Snape. It is Veritaserum, a truth potion so powerful that 3 drops would have you spilling your innermost secrets for this entire class to hear, said Snape viciously. Now, the use of this potion is controlled by very strict ministry guidelines, but unless you watch your step, you might just find that my hand slips. He shook the crystal bottle slightly, right over your evening pumpkin juice. And then, Potter, then we'll find out whether you've been in my office or not. I think there's 2 ways to read this. 1, it is an incredibly powerful truth potion that will have you spilling your secrets. Or 2, Snape is trying to sort of scare Harry here, and we're seeing it from Harry's point of view as like a 14-year-old talking to an adult. That one might be the more likely of the 2 because there's a lot of limitations that are pretty regularly called out with, this is the second time, I keep almost saying Veritaserum. The most glaring plot hole that is very often brought up that I'll talk about here is the idea that Sirius Black should have just taken some Veritaserum and cleared his name. I don't, however, think this is actually a plot hole. So first and foremost, Sirius Black is a powerful wizard, and we know from multiple different sources, whether or not you like it, that Veritaserum can be countered by other powerful magic users. The best way is from J.K. Rowling herself. Veritaserum works best on the unsuspecting, the vulnerable, and those insufficiently skilled in one way or another to protect themselves against it. Barty Crouch had been attacked before the potion was given to him and was still very groggy. Otherwise, he could have employed a range of measures against the potion. He might have sealed his own throat and faked a declaration of innocence, transformed the potion into something else before it touched his lips, or employed occlumency against its effects. In other words, just like every other kind of magic within the books, Veritaserum is not infallible. As some wizards can prevent themselves from being affected and others cannot, it is an unfair and unreliable tool to be used at a trial. Now, like it or not, I think this is a pretty reasonable explanation for the limits of Veritaserum. We don't see it used in any way that would contradict this statement here, so I'm poised to sort of accept that as fact. I do think a lot of the frustration from people here is from inconsistencies in their description. One way to interpret that is, again, as Harry being an unreliable narrator. On one hand, we have Snape telling him it'll make him spill all his secrets.
Know what it is?
Bubble juice, sir.
On the other hand, Dumbledore kind of warns about the limitations of it. But surely, sir, he said, keeping his voice as respectful as possible, you don't need me. You could use Legilimency or Veritaserum. Professor Slughorn is an extremely able wizard who will be expecting both, said Dumbledore. He's much more accomplished at occlumency than that poor Morphin Gaunt, and I would be astonished if he has not carried an antidote to Veritaserum with him ever since I coerced him into giving me this travesty of a recollection. On 14-year-olds, is it a super potion that will make you spill all your secrets? Probably. On a wizard cop or sufficiently skilled wizard, will it? Probably not. Especially if you're in a situation where you come up against this kind of stuff often, you would probably have some defenses. I think in the worst case scenario, again, we see witches and wizards that are used to conflict. They are like battle hardened in a way. I would suspect that most magical people in this world are really not that good at magic. So if you were to roll this out against everyday witches and wizards, I don't know that they would be able to defend themselves in the same way that a Hogwarts professor might be able to, or any of the Aurors might be able to. So the real issue here is that using it in any sort of legislative way, you could never be sure who was able to counter it and who wasn't. Really, you would just end up letting the really bad people get away because they're probably the most skilled at magic, and the everyday petty crime people would pay the price for it most of the time. So as much as I want to give Veritaserum a higher ranking, I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 5. I think there's probably a broader conversation about truth within this series to discuss and all the various ways they have at detecting lies and truth. But for now, I'm gonna leave it at a 2 out of 5. The Elder Wand. On to my third and final Deathly Hallow. Surely this one is gonna be different, right? The Elder Wand is pitched time and time again as being somehow distinct from other wands. We see it in a lot of different sources that it has some power that normal wands do not have. Even if it's not explicitly outlined, it seems to be different. The general practice of burying or burning the wand with its owner once he or she died also tends to prevent any individual wand from learning too many masters. Believers in the Elder Wand, however, hold that because of the way in which it has always passed allegiance between owners, the next master overcoming the first, usually by killing him, the Elder Wand has never been destroyed or buried, but has survived to accumulate wisdom, strength, and power far beyond the ordinary. This is from the Tales of Beedle the Bard, which, if I remember correctly, is like a recounting of Dumbledore's own thoughts in some parts of it. So he seems to believe, he does in different situations as well, that the Elder Wand does have some distinct power as compared to normal wands. Maybe a man in a million could unite the Hallows, Harry. I was fit only to possess the meanest of them, the least extraordinary. I was fit to own the Elder Wand, and not to boast of it, and not to kill with it. I was permitted to tame and use it, because I took it not for gain, but to save others from it. So there's two ways to think about this. Either Dumbledore is saying that the wand truly has some special power, or B, he's saving people from this repeating pattern of fighting and killing for it, even though it's just a normal, ordinary wand. It's not totally clear what he thinks here, though. Voldemort, on the other hand, seems to have some intuition that the wand is not performing as he would like it to. All this night long, when I am on the brink of victory, I have sat here, said Voldemort, his voice barely louder than a whisper, wondering why the Elder Wand refuses to be what it ought to be, refuses to perform as legend says it must perform for its rightful owner. And I think I have the answer. Snape did not speak. Perhaps you already know it. You are a very clever man, after all, Severus. You have been a good and faithful servant, and I regret what must happen. My lord, the Elder Wand cannot serve me properly, Severus, because I am not its true master. The Elder Wand belongs to the wizard who killed its last owner. You killed Albus Dumbledore. While you live, Severus, the Elder Wand cannot be truly mine. So he comes to this conclusion, through some form of intuition. Maybe his spells aren't working quite the same way as they should, or maybe they're not quite as powerful as he thinks they should be. It's like he's comparing tech specs between different generations of laptops or something. He's got the China NVIDIA chip, but Elder Wand's the newest one that we can't sell over there. And again, there's two different ways to read this. Either he has fallen into the trap of the Elder Wand and like he thinks it should be more powerful, but it really shouldn't be. It really is no different. Or what I think might be plausible is that he obviously has some intuition when it comes to magic. He's like the second or most powerful wizard there is. He would have some intuition about how his magic is performing. Whether or not he's completely correct, I do think he has at least some inkling of how things should work, which to me would imply that the Elder Wand does truly have the capability of creating more powerful magic. How much more powerful? Who knows? I do have a question as I was thinking about this. Why didn't Voldemort get ownership of the Elder Wand when he killed Harry in the Forbidden Forest? Was it truly just because Harry willingly gave himself up? I don't know why the Elder Wand chose to make a distinction there versus other times when the wand was unceremoniously stolen from someone else. I mean, people have been murdered in their sleep and that transferred the ownership. So is it just because he willingly gave himself up? JK also made a note that the core of the wand is the hair of a Thestral, which can only be mastered by someone that's capable of facing death. So maybe that's part of it too, but that seems distinct from the Deathly Hallow lore. Regardless, the wand is supposed to be more powerful. The only problem is the only power that we see it have is repairing another wand. He laid the broken wand above the headmaster's desk, touched it with the very tip of the Elder Wand, and said, "Reparo." As his wand resealed, red sparks flew out of its end. Harry knew that he had succeeded. He picked up the Holly and Phoenix wand and felt a sudden warmth in his fingers, as though wand and hand were rejoicing at their reunion. So, that is just about the only example we have of it performing magic that something else can't, that some other wand can't. What else can it do? Does it make bigger explosions? It clearly can't solve everything. I mean, Dumbledore isn't able to unpetrify students from the Basilisk back in Book 2. Whether or not J.K. Rowling knew that he had the Elder Wand in Book 2, who knows, but it can't do everything. And really, after all of this, it makes me wonder if it is distinct from any other wand, period. I think potentially that's the point of all of this, is that it's the same as any other wand, but it's always complicated by the fact that the wand can do some minor things differently that other wands can't. So there's like a hint of doubt in it all, but at the end of the day, I think it really is just a normal wand that also happens to be able to repair other wands. And because of that, I'm giving the third and final Deathly Hallow a 1 out of 5. And with that, I have officially ranked every item on my list. Everything from the completely harmless Deathly Hallows to the society-shattering Liquid Luck. I'm sure there were plenty that I didn't include, and maybe I'll make a follow-up video at some point about even more of these, but let me know in the comments which ones I should do next time. If you like this video, there's a really similar one about ranking spells that you'll probably definitely like if you watched an hour and a half of this. Just check it out here. Lastly, don't forget there's a Discord link, there's a Patreon for ad-free versions, there's YouTube members for early access to the videos, and some custom badges and emojis and everything. All that stuff is in the links. You can find it all down below. Thanks again to CyberGhost VPN for sponsoring today's video. If you want to take back your online privacy, unlock global content, and stop your browser from acting like the Marauders Map for your internet service provider, consider CyberGhost VPN. Just $2.03 a month, plus 4 months completely free. And there's a 45-day money-back guarantee. There's literally nothing to lose. Check out the link in the description and start protecting your digital life today. With that said, I got nothing else to say. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.